Hello and welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Japanese Politics 101 room. Every Sunday, Timothy Langley, Chief Executive Officer of Langley Esquire, a Tokyo-based public affairs consultancy, and host Maya Matsuoka bring to you the latest developments in Japanese politics. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions, and opinions, so if you haven't done so yet, join us next time. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and the Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region. Good morning, everybody.
Oops.
Whoops. Okay, so thank you very much for coming again this early on Sunday morning. We've got Timothy Langley, Chief Executive Officer of Langley Esquire. And, he's going to walk us again through the latest events in the Japanese politics. Of course, the LDP presidential election has been in the news for at least for 2 weeks now, and we know that the person who is elected as president of the party is most likely to become the next prime minister of Japan. So this is really an important topic for the media, for the business in Japan, Japan Inc. as well. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about the candidates again, and then how the election is going to occur and what happens after the election, how the new cabinet will be selected. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Timothy. So let's see. Timothy, please.
Thank you very much, Maya. From time to time, my connection seems to be a little bit weak, so please bear with me. And if you lose me, maybe take over the conversation until I can find a better signal. Okay?
I'll try to. Hold on, nobody can.
Thank you. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us every week to delve into what's going on in Japanese politics that's important to you, even if you might not be a voter or a Japanese national. Still, what happens in Japanese politics is important to all of us, to Japan watchers, to people who live here, to people who are interested in geopolitics in the region. Japan is critically important in that dynamic, and also in world economy as the number 3 economy in the world. So it's important for people to be apprised of what's going on and what it might mean for the near term. So that's probably the essential purpose of having this room, is to talk about what's going on that's important to you, and to try and decipher what it means in the short term or in the medium term. So with that in mind, let's just get right into it. We have an election for prime minister that will be a week from, it'll be a week from tomorrow. That's when the prime minister will be elected within the parliament. But before that, the LDP has their election, and that's the hot topic that we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks. That selection process is internal to the LDP. They will select their new LDP president, the party president. And it's really intensely interesting, because the LDP, it has been for most part since the end of the Pacific War, the party in power. And so what goes on within the LDP not dictates, and it somewhat defines, but it pretty much is a guidance to what happens in Japanese politics overall, and that means to the economy, to trade, to defense, and that sort of thing. So the party president, and thus the prime minister of Japan, what their background is, what their thoughts are on various issues is pretty important. And this only comes around every once in a while, or in recent history, with Abe as the longest sitting prime minister. I think all people agree that having a stable prime minister in Japan, it benefits Japan. It helps Japan establish itself more securely in the rest of the world, but particularly with the EC countries. And when we previously had a rotation of prime ministers, it was not good for the image of Japan. So, excuse me, it is hoped that this next election will be a strong endorsement of a particular candidate, that the party will get behind it, and that the infighting will not generate the controversy or the scandal that is going to pull down a government, and then we have another election. You might remember that in conversations with Konotaro and Asotaro, it seems like the leader of the Aso faction was trying to guide Taro Kono into not running this time because he predicted it would be a short tenure for the prime minister. So his advice was, hold your horses, keep your powder dry because there's more in store. And that advice was listened to but not followed. And as a consequence, we have this fracture of different factions supporting or endorsing candidates, but telling their members, but you can vote with your heart. I am the leader of your faction, so I've helped you for the last 4 years, and I'm voting for this person. But if you don't want to, make a funny face with tweaking of your nose, if you don't want to, that's okay. Vote for somebody else, but I'm going to remember that. So it's an interesting kind of new dynamic within Japanese politics. So with that as just kind of a overall setting of the stage, let me get into more the dynamics of what's going on right now and what we can anticipate. So as you might know, the president, he's currently the president of the LDP and prime minister, Mr. Suga, he's on his flight back from Washington, D.C. He left on Thursday of last week to go to Washington, D.C. to have a quad meeting with the leaders of the United States, Australia, and India. And the four of them met. He met individually with each of those leaders, and they had a joint statement, and then he got on the airplane, and he's on his way back home. He's on his way back home because in 3 short days, there will be this important election, of which he has some weight in determining. So what's going to happen on Wednesday is there are 4 candidates. If you want to get into the dynamics of the candidates, their positions and that sort of thing, I think everybody pretty much knows who the 4 candidates are, so we don't need to dwell too much on that. It's Fumio Kishida, Taro Kono, Sanai Takeichi, and Seiko Noda, who are vying for the premiership of the LDP. And that vote happens on Wednesday. So what we have been experiencing for this last 6 days or so, and which we'll experience until close of the day on Tuesday, is the candidates promoting themselves, talking about their issues, showing, in visual form, them speaking with lots of people standing behind them to project this image that they're a unifier, that they represent a large number of LDP members. So if you vote for them, then they have the weight of the administration behind them. So you'll see that prominently. And you'll also see the candidates become a little bit more aggressive in their stances. So when this whole thing started about a week ago, some of the candidates were, like, for example, Konotaro was a little bit more specific about where he stood on issues. He came out about his change in position on nuclear energy, and he came out very quickly about same-sex marriage and the treatment of surnames that he was endorsing. Others were somewhat couched in their positions. They didn't want to reveal too much, but as it becomes a little bit more heated, then they become a little bit more um, expansive on their positions. And as a consequence of that, gosh, we meet every week, and the change from week to week is just so dramatic. I'm really glad we have this opportunity. So this time last week, it was kind of a toss-up. It's going to be a four-candidate race, but since there are four candidates, nobody's going to be able to get 51% and become immediately elected as president of the LDP. There are just too many people, and they're relatively good candidates. So it's going to go into a runoff, which means that the largest um, vote getters in the first round, the losing two will fall off, and it'll be a race between those two people. And the dynamics of the count is a little bit different. But this time last week, we were talking about Konotaro and Fumio Kishida and nobody else. We weren't talking about Takeichi, and we weren't talking about Noda. Today, since the role of the press and being on TV and being more expansive about your positions, oh my gosh, Takeichi Sanai has really rocketed up the appreciation level. So she's come out as articulate, as very specific in her positions, unwavering. She represents a conservative view, far more conservative than Mr. Abe when he was prime minister, but even when he was running for prime minister, he was not as expansive or as specific on his conservative views as Takaichi is. And that's garnered her terrific support. So she has rocketed up in the approvals. And it looks like now, we still have a couple of days, so a lot is left to be seen, but it looks like now it might be a three-way race between Kishida, Kono, and Takaichi. These next couple of days are going to be important to watch how the candidates express themselves. You might remember that some of the positions which were promoted by one candidate were adopted by the other candidate when they looked at what the opinion polls told them about that stance. So they've been somewhat changing, somewhat malleable. I think probably Kishida a little bit more malleable. He appears to be whatever it's going to take for me to become prime minister. I want to adopt that. I want to promote that. Kono, to less of a degree, he is rather founded on his principles and on his stance. He did waver a little bit on nuclear energy, but I think his acknowledgement of that went into his favor. It is unavoidable that nuclear must play a role in Japan's energy mix, and so he backed off, and he was forthright about it. But Takaichi is she's conservative. She has kind of a holdover of the Abe administration. She's received the support of Mr. Abe, and she's published a manifesto, a book about her view of how Japan economics and how Japan society should be driven. And it's basically a copy and paste with Tabasco added of Abenomics with the three arrows, but it's a little bit more on steroids than even Mr. Abe. So that appeals to a certain constituent of not just the politicians and the members of the parliament, but also to the Japanese public in whole. So what we've got on Wednesday of next week is the four candidates will be voted upon. There will be more likely than not two runs. There'll be the runoff for all four of the candidates. They will be lined up. The party will vote. There will be 382 votes cast by members of the LDP. Those are individuals who hold seats in the upper house or the lower house. And there are 382 LDP members collectively in both houses. And similarly, there will be 382 votes that are distributed to people who belong to the LDP throughout the entire nation of Japan. And those votes will be calculated. And if there is a clear winner, somebody gets 51%, then they will become LDP president. It's unlikely that one individual will do that. Konotaro is trying really hard to get, he will probably win, potentially win 51% of the popular vote, 82 votes that are distributed to the prefectures and to the LDP members outside of the parliament. He's less likely to get more than 51% with the 382 members within the Diet, and he's not as strong there. On the other hand, Mr. Kishida does appear to be a little bit stronger in that area where he's weaker in the popular vote. But now you've got a dark horse, Sanai Takeichi, who has come up and she's robbing votes from both Konotaro and Kishida. And she's doing it in such a way that I think both Kishida and Konotaro are beginning to look over their shoulders, and they might be encouraged to do something a little bit more dramatically, say something a little bit more on the edge to garner attention, or to maybe acquiesce on a position that they had held earlier to capture more of the votes. In any event, they will have two votes on Wednesday, and at the end of the day, there will be a press release, and everybody will clap and get behind the candidate who won the LDP presidency. That will be on a Wednesday. Then you got Thursday and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then on Monday there will be an election in the Diet for prime minister, because the current prime minister, Mr. Suga, his term of office expires on Thursday. So he will be a holdover prime minister on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Monday he will give up the ghost, and a new prime minister will be elected by members of the parliament. And just to give you the details of how that happens, there are 245 members in the upper house. There are 464 members in the lower house. There are two chambers. There are two houses. They look almost identical. The number of seating positions in the lower house is far more numerous, but the design and the layout is pretty similar. The 245 members of the upper house will collect, and they will vote. They will have a vote. It'll be on TV. They'll walk up and they'll put in a chit at the dais to vote for prime minister. Similarly, on the other end of the parliament building is the chamber for the lower house. They will do the same thing. Typically in that vote, which is different from the LDP party vote, in that vote, the various political parties will vote for their chief, their president, the president of their party. And since the LDP holds the largest number of candidates in both houses, not more than 51%, but holds enough so that in a runoff, they will get the most votes and therefore become prime minister. You know that the LDP is in a coalition with Komeito. Komeito will probably vote for their party president, not for the LDP. The coalition is usually for convenience of election districts and guaranteeing how elections are going to be run in the event of a prefectural election. But in this instance, their allegiance is to their party president. So the coalition does not really impact on the vote of prime minister. And so the members of various political parties usually vote party line. In any event, the LDP is going to come up with the candidate that they selected 4 days earlier to become prime minister. And if in this instance the lower house votes for one candidate and the upper house votes for another candidate, they have to have that runoff. But the lower house, because it has more numbers, their vote will carry the day, even if it is different from the upper house. I don't think that's going to happen, but you just need to understand that at sometimes the upper house and the lower house are at great odds with each other, and the dynamics are different. The way it is right now, the LDP holds the majority of the prominence of members in both houses, and with the coalition of Komeito, they hold a majority approaching 66%. So Monday of next week, we have a prime minister. And since he's had several days, and in fact, all of the candidates are trying to get members of the parliament to vote for them, to give them their endorsement. They have received that in some instances, and the way that they get that, or the way that they cajole their LDP colleagues to vote for them, is they sometimes dangle party positions, posts, and ministerial portfolios to get these individuals. So usually the people who they are talking the most animatedly with are those people who, if they have a coalition of people who will vote for them, so they're looking to the younger members are looking to a kind of a father figure. Please tell me how I should vote, because if you get a ministerial portfolio and I'm in your group, I'm going to benefit from that too. So there's a lot of jockeying for position there. So this selection of who would be your most potential cabinet ministers, each of these candidates is already calculating that now. So whoever wins on Wednesday, yeah, there might be a couple of positions that are held in just in case, but I would think any candidate has already got a pretty good idea of who the cabinet is. Then when the reality hits you on Wednesday night that you're going to become prime minister, maybe you do a little bit of shifting. But the expectation is that any of the candidates that are elected on Monday to become prime minister will already have their cabinet in place, because they're going to announce it. I'm prime minister. Thank you very much. Thank you for endorsement. And then on that day, they will announce who their cabinet will be. And we can anticipate, great transitions there. I don't know if Taro Aso is still up for Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. And that is one of the juiciest of portfolios. The Speaker of the Kambochokan, the Chief Cabinet Minister, is also a choice role. So these positions are almost certain to change. Also, we talked a lot about the creation of the digital agency. The head of that one, Mr. Hirai, is also likely to change. So there's a lot of horse trading to be had here. Definitely, I think you can look forward to a change in the foreign minister and the Minister of Finance, maybe even Meti minister. So it'll be a whole shift. And I think one of the things people are concerned about is if it's Mr. Kishida, he's stable, he's a long-term LDP standard. He was the longest serving foreign minister, which is kind of strange because there are lots of foreign ministers that we remember for their prominence. But even if Mr. Kishida was the longest serving foreign minister, we don't remember him for many of the things that he might have done. So it's just kind of his personality. But if people want pretty much what we've had in the past and very few changes, Mr. Kishida is probably the person to go with. If you're a little bit irritated by the pace of change and the response to COVID, and why can't we, join the technology of the rest of the world and improve our banking system and that sort of thing, then probably Konotaro is the candidate you want to go with. It's kind of up in the air, actually, especially with the emergence of Sanai Takeichi. So the formation of the cabinet will be announced on Monday, and then there'll be like vice ministers. There'll be some committee seats, and there'll also be this change within the ranks of the LDP. You know, remember Mr. Um, Nikai was so electric and causing a lot of trouble between, Asotaro and Mr. Abe, that really kind of pushed us into the situation that we have right now. His position will become open, as will the other three chief positions within the LDP. So all of the people that we're talking about now, Nikai will be in some sort of a role. Uh, Ishiba will be in some sort of a role. He pulled out. He's not going to run. He promised he wouldn't run, and he endorsed Konotaro, which means that now Mr. Abe doesn't like Konotaro, because although he might have liked him, now he's supporting Ishiba, which he doesn't like. And similarly, Asotaro, whose faction Mr. Kono comes from, he doesn't like Ishiba, and Ishiba is wait a minute, kid, you're in my faction. You should do what I want you to do. And why the hell did you invite Mr. Ishiba into your endorsement? Now I'm going to tell everybody in our faction, you can vote for Konotaro. He's a good guy, but vote with your heart too. So I like Mr. Kishida, he would say, or Mr. Abe might say something like that. Just as long as everybody, if you don't vote for Sanai Takeichi, it's okay, but only if you're going to vote for Kishida. So he's splitting his endorsements. And it just came out that in the largest faction is the faction that Mr. Abe is in. He's kind of the shadow leader of that, but it is led by Mr. Hosoda. Mr. Hosoda has said publicly to his 96 member Hosoda faction, I want you to vote for Kishida. In the runoff, I want you to vote for Kishida. So that's pretty huge. The younger members of the Diet, those members who have won maybe 3 terms or less, they're really nervous about being reelected. And for any parliamentarian, the most important thing in your portfolio is being reelected. So there's a lot of, what would we say, maybe flexibility in your moral fiber for concerns that you or your constituents might have when weighed against the ability to be reelected. Everything else falls into a secondary position. So particularly with the younger members, is it Kono? Is it Kishida? Is it Takeuchi? If I vote the wrong way, maybe I'm not going to win when the election comes up. And the election is almost, it will be announced almost immediately after the prime minister is elected from the parliament. So everybody's very nervous about that. And there is a direct correlation between who becomes prime minister and how you might do in your election. So endorsements have been received by the younger members. It looks like Kono is doing a little bit better. He's got 35 younger members who have endorsed him, publicly endorsed him. Kishida has 28 and Takeuchi has 32. 32 is better than what Kishida has. So you can see that the younger members of the parliament are beginning to gravitate towards Takeuchi, and this will become important in the second round. Within the LDP, the members of the LDP, the older, more staid members, you've got, with Konotaro, you've got 82 who have publicly said we're going to vote for Konotaro. You've got 97 who have publicly stated they will stand with Kishida. That's a big number. And with Takeuchi, you've got 68. So the ranking for among the older members of the LDP, Kishida stands in in better position than Kono, Taro. But there are 114 that are undecided. So that's the swing vote. That's really huge. Those are the people that are wondering, if they get a phone call from one of the candidates, is there a kind of a sweetener at the end? If you endorse me, then, I know you've been interested in health and welfare, and there will be a portfolio or a position that, I can envision for you. So I would really appreciate you um, supporting me. And if you can convince, 6 or 7 of your friends to do that, then it's pretty much a guarantee of you getting a position within the administration. Those kinds of conversations are going on now. So I'd like to shift that because I want to get right to your questions as quickly as possible. And maybe some of this is, I don't know, too much navel gazing. I'm not sure. I can't tell until I open the room for questions. But there's something that we all have to keep in mind, that this party vote on Wednesday is followed by the prime ministerial vote on Monday and the cabinet formation. But quickly, we have to have a vote for 464 members of the lower house. That has to happen in probably the beginning of November. There's 2 scenarios where that vote will occur, but it's inevitable that 464 members of the parliament are going to be looking to succeed themselves, and it will be a lot of rock and roll in October. So October, you've got the new prime minister, the new cabinet. You've got generally a honeymoon period. People generally give the prime minister a little bit of leeway to define their policies, to project what their administration is going to be. People give them a little bit of rope, and then they become a little bit more mean and uh, critical, about 2 months into it, maybe 3 months. So this election of the lower house is pressing on everyone, and that will happen really quickly. And there's no rest. So let's say we have the 464 members of the lower house that are elected. There are 2 scenarios. One would be that they're elected on November 4th, and the other one is November 14th, both Sundays. So Sunday is the day when the votes are taken in. That's in November. December, January, February, March, April, May, June. Now you have the election for the upper house. Half of the members of the upper house go for election in June. So it doesn't stop. So having these discussions, following where the ball is, um, it's just a never-ending game. With regard to the issues on which the candidates are promoting themselves, they come down to just a small number, because everybody is interested in the economy, everybody's interested in COVID. So on these positions, the candidates try to distinguish themselves to the voters and to the members of the parliament. How they appeal to the voters, the Japanese population at large, means only how they appeal to the LDP. But I think they're somewhat considered to be one and the same. It makes a certain amount of sense, but they are only LDP members. There's one audience there, and then the other audience is the LDP. And the LDP, the calculus that they use is, do I know this person? Has this person helped me? Do I have faith and confidence in them? Do they have sustainability? So that calculus, the popularity of the population at large, and the air quotes popularity within the diet, they're very, very different, and they're run on a different kind of evaluation. So how the individual stands on nuclear or on North Korea, on the environment, on going, carbon neutral, the U.S.-Japan relationship, where they stand on China, um, the social issues about how to deal with the elderly, the surnames, the big issues that um, you know the the culture is involved in. Um, Also, how they feel about Taiwan. So each of these issues that I've touched upon, I'm sure you, in your mind, you're rolling over. Yes, I remember that candidate said this about that, and I remember that on Taiwan, Takeichi, she had a one-on-one with the president of Taiwan, and that was rather unusual. And I remember about carbon neutral, maybe Mr. Kishida said that. So these are all issues that they're trying to distinguish themselves. But for example, on nuclear, the Japanese population might say, I hate nuclear because of Fukushima and all of that stuff. But in the political side, nuclear produces money and it produces votes. It big business and that sort of thing. How you balance that so that you might support nuclear because in your election district there's, I don't know, maybe storage facilities or something to do with nuclear. It generates money for you and your constituency, so you might be voting with that, whereas the general population might have a different feeling about it. So that's politics. With that, I've been going on now for about a half an hour, and I'd like to open the room up, Maya, so that we can bring on some of our really keen observers and rabble rousers so that we can talk about this and get a better feel for what's going on in Japanese politics and we can anticipate in the short term. Thank you, everybody, for staying tuned and not just signing off as soon as I started talking.
Thank you, Timothy. And yes, I invite everybody who would like to comment on the topic or share their opinion. Please let us know, raise your hand, and we'll bring you up on stage. In the meantime, Timothy, just a thought occurred to me, and well, this morning when we were doing the preliminary meeting, we were talking about Takeichi and how she represents a very conservative agenda she has. She's much more conservative than Mr. Abe, and so I just wondered, and this thought occurred to me just now, whether this is her conservative agenda, uh, is it a way to balance her being female? Because obviously, if, we haven't had a female prime minister in Japan, and if there is one, it's probably likely to happen this time. And obviously, she wants to be, prime minister. So I just wondered whether, it really looks like kind of a balancing act, that conservative agenda and trying to appeal to the largely conservative base of LDP too, and the Diet members as well. I don't know, maybe it's really a very far-fetched thing, but I wonder what your opinion is on this.
Thank you. That's a great observation. Takeichi is sometimes mentioned as an honorary man, right?
Yeah.
She's female, but she holds positions that are kind of like not oyaji position, but more like the middle-aged man. She's middle-aged herself, no kids, but yeah, she's standing in that delicate place between male-dominated environment and this emergence and this cry from the population about being softer and more gentle and involving women in the economy and in politics. So there's that too. I think she's playing a really a pretty good role in distinguishing herself and being a female too. So it's not like some of the other politicians that we've seen who are female that look nice, that read the speeches that are given to them, but they just feel like they don't have any substance to them. She does, and I think she's long been held. And on TV, people are remarking about how well founded she is on the positions that she holds. So she is her own person, and I think having a candidate for prime minister who is female is dynamic. And one of the things about politics is that, especially in Japan, you hear this all the time. It's matsuri. It's like a festival. Japanese people love this sort of thing. And yes, it evolves or it ends up into being politics, but it's just a big party, and we celebrate and we drink and we clap hands, and it's that sort of thing. But if that is kind of one of the aspects of Japanese elections and how it evolves into politics, then having any form of excitement or an issue that's going to generate, the public participation in is a winning gamble. So the fact that she is a powerful contender potentially for prime minister generates more people coming out to vote, more people wanting to be involved in that party. So I think it's a great opportunity. Um, and I think she's going to do really well. It would be, this time next week, we're going to have a different conversation on this room. We're going to actually be talking about who is the prime minister, and the possibility of it being uh, Takeichi is pretty dynamic, and we will know that within the next couple of days. I hope that responds somewhat to your question, Maya.
Yes, it does. Thank you for that. Well, I would like to welcome Miho to the stage.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Hi, Miho.
Hi, good morning. Um, well, as you can see, like from my profile, I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I'm working for the people those who are survivors of child abuse, and like a very difficult situation in this country in Japan. So, and talk about like Takaichi Sanae. She is a member of Nihon Kaigi, one of the very conservative group, and like she her group like called Nihon Kaigi has another group of called Nihon Taibatsu no Kai, which means they are recommending when teach children like they need to punish, like they really have to punish physically. They believe that, and as because of my position, I really hate to be she is gonna be a prime minister. I really don't want to her to be our prime minister, but this is my personal opinion. And so it's if I could explain the situation of Japanese survivors, children of child abuse is really difficult situations, and there's no concept of advocacy, and they don't even have the kind of systems in which other country has. And also like many survivors doesn't have the good medical support from that, and many of like survivor of child abuse are grown up and living in a government support which called 生活保護, and they don't have a lot of money, and like they only get maybe about 600 to $700 per month. And also in Japan, like when you get counseling, mental counseling, they have to pay maybe about $100 for, so like they don't afford for it. Many child abuse victim or survivors can't afford for the mental support. It is
Right.
a really difficult situation. And I'm sorry for like a different far part out of my this topic. I understand you are coming from. And my personally, I really don't want to Takaichi Sanae to be our prime minister, and also I don't really want to be the LDP to take the control of this country. Really don't want to, because they no respect of human rights. Really
Hmm.
don't want to that. This is my opinion. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for describing that. The positions that you are endorsing more closely fit uh, uh, probably the candidate Ms. Noda, or maybe even Mr. Kishida. But
Yeah,
there is,
don't want to be LDP because like they no respect for the human rights, and they only respect the benefit of
Yep.
huge
Big business.
yeah,
Exactly. Big
huge.
business. Right. But there's a very strong contingent within Japanese politics and Japanese society that ascribes to Nihon Kaigi. Nippon Kaigi is, the foundation of, what the Japanese admire the most about themselves. But it does come with, other consequences. It seems to be too old school. It is against the pacifist constitution. But, there's, especially the younger members of the parliament are, more closely affiliated, even though they might not join as a formal member of Nippon Kaigi because it sends different kinds of signals. And also, she also said that she would continue visiting Yatsukuni Jinja as she has ever since she's been a member of the parliament. So, yeah, there is a distinct line there. And probably what that does, as you've described, is it pushes you out of the LDP. You just say, you guys, you're not even listening to us. You don't pay attention. The normal people, the disparity between the rich and the poor has only grown greater. So maybe it's Kometa that you join, or one of the other parties that appeals to you more broadly. Thank you for joining our room. I think this is your first time here. Please continue to join us and weigh in with your.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Ren, good morning.
Good morning, Maya. Good morning, Timothy. Great room as usual, as always. I have a quick question for Timothy. It was a little bit of a surprise to me, at least to me, that Aso did not support Takaichi, but supported Kishida. The reason I was surprised was usually Aso and Abe are working together. And
Right.
the other reason I was surprised was I thought Aso was supporting Takaichi at first, but now he switched to Kishida. And if you have any insight or or your personal opinion about how or why this happened, it would be great if you could share that with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ren. I also was a little bit surprised there, but I think, especially with an old codger like that, these guys are much more calculating. They're much more attuned to what it means for them. And he is the leader of a political faction. He's probably on the last ropes of being finance minister. And that might be it. That might be, if I throw my weight behind a candidate to such a degree that that candidate wins, I pretty much can call which ministerial portfolio I want, and I like being foreign finance minister. Maybe that's part of it. Or maybe he says, I want to give up the ghost on being the finance minister because I want to be out of the limelight. That doesn't sound like him. I want to be out of the limelight and control things from the background. So I want somebody in my faction to become the finance minister, because then I can kind of continue to be finance minister. I think that's for that particular individual. I think that's that to me is a good logical explanation. Similarly with Abe, him choosing Takeichi is indicative of his desire to continue the Hosoda faction to be the largest faction, and for him to be able to influence Japanese politics far into the future. Hopefully, winning the election of the lower house so that there's a far greater number, and we can approach the 2/3 majority, and we can continue with the march on constitutional reform. She's endorsed all of those positions, so he's probably endorsing her. And his endorsement, by the way, is the most astounding thing about her candidacy. It is the reason why she is surviving right now, because of his strong support. So even if she doesn't become prime minister, her standing in this election, the way she holds herself, the way that she projects her views on LDP politics, will probably give her a ministerial portfolio as a consolation prize. You can anticipate that. Any prize that she wins, she has won as a consequence of Mr. Abe, and therefore he retains the ability to manage and control some of those aspects. I think that's a pretty good guiding light to determining how and why these people are doing that.
Thank you. That makes logical sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ren. And well, I can see Tom today. Tom, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you, Tim and Maya, for this great platform. I've been listening from time to time, but this is the first time to ask a question here.
Thomas, we can
yes.
always tell it's you because you've got a voice for radio.
Yes.
Uh-oh. Now the pressure's on.
Yeah.
Okay. So here are two questions. One's a big question, one's a small question. In a larger geopolitical context here within Asia, I can understand from Beijing's position a preference between the opposition and the LDP. I would imagine, they would be delighted to have the opposition in, particularly Kyosanto or the others. But is there any indication of a gradation of a preference or between the four candidates that would be, let's say, more palatable to Beijing, because they read the cards and they know it will be one of those four, and there may not be, but I'm just curious on that aspect. And the second one is
there very definitely is. What's the second part?
In the second one's an easy one. Noda Seiko, what's her game here? Because her support seems so small, and she's kind of an also-ran. Maybe you have something along her long-term objectives. And that's all the questions I have.
Great. Thank you very much. Please continue to join us. You have a very distinguished background and career here in Japan, and your input will be always valued. With regard to the how candidates view the relationship between Japan and China, or Japan and Taiwan, there's really a distinct difference among the candidates, and I would put Takeichi on the farther right than what Mr. Abe was, but she's also very adamant about defense spending, about having offensive capabilities, about trade with regard to China, and I think she's on defense. She's very strong. On the other side of the spectrum, you have Noda Seiko, who is the chairperson of the China-Japan Parliamentary group, and she is kind of the accolade of Mr. Nikai. And Mr. Nikai, she served under him. He is one of the most he's the strongest proponent of the Japan-China relationship. So that's the spectrum. Then you have Kishida and Kono, who fall in between. But if you're looking for those kind of boundaries, yes, definitely, Takeichi is strongly opposed to China's encroachment, and Noda Seiko is more, let's discuss, let's be friends. China is a big, economy. It dominates the South Pacific. Let's be friends. Whereas probably other parties, and it kind of goes along with what the earlier conversation we're having about Nippon Kaigi, Japan must be strong. We need to revise the constitution. We need to project our power. Those are the positions there. With regard to the game of Noda Seiko, I think since she was under Mr. Nikai and Mr. Nikai couldn't or didn't want to become a candidate, he probably was encouraging her. You go, girl, you can do it. I'll support you. We need to have a female candidate there. She's tried it in the past and not had enough of an endorsement to do that. But I think probably like other candidates we've seen in the past, maybe like Mr. on the candidates list, you're still young. You still got plenty of juice in the gas tank. maybe not this election, but the next election or the election after that, just be prominent, be identified as a air quote leader, and eventually that time will come. That's kind of the game that Konotara has played. He's been in the background saying he wants to run, saying he would, if he was asked, he would run for party president. Also, Mr. Kishida has said that, even when Mr. Abe was prime minister, and he got slapped down for kind of speaking out of turn. So it's a delicate game, and I think she's in it for the long term. So even though you'll recall that she was the last candidate to kind of throw her hat into the ring and to get the 20 endorsements. So I think it's just a long game that she's playing. I hope that responds.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Tim. Great insight as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Very much appreciated your questions. And we've got also Yuka. Yuka, welcome back. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Yuka.
Thank you. Great. I always learn something new from this club, Timothy and Maya. Today, I love the phrase, Timothy, the flexibility on moral fibers. That was great. I'm gonna use that. Thank you. But anyway, on the more serious note, Miho-san, I'm glad that you came back. Thank you so much for coming up to the stage. I didn't know those agencies even existed, so that was an eye-opening for me. So I thank you for that. And so my question to you, Timothy, so no matter who's going to win, it's going to be LDP, right? And you said from the
That's right.
from the perspective of EU or US, in general, everything will be status quo, which is viewed as positive as a country. Is it really true? I think because look at the economy, look at the last 10 years. I think we need to change something. But I agree with Miho-san. As much as I like to support Ms. Takaichi because she's my fellow female, but she's just too conservative for me. So then who's there? So my understand, according to my homework, I'm just saying that because I wanted to show you guys that I did my homework. So so Mizuno, isn't he projecting his image as more conservative than he really is? So the reason I'm asking you this is I like to ask a historical sense of Japanese policy. When a candidate is elected as a prime minister, how much of campaign promises do they keep? So this may not be a good example, President Trump. He promised that he was going to build some wall on the Arizona Mexico border, and I don't know. And I'm not saying that either I support or I didn't like the idea, but I think at least he tried to do that. In Japan, politicians, will they try to keep their promises? Or they nobody remember what they said during the campaign, and in life is as usual.
Yeah.
So if you could educate me, thank you.
Great. And thank you for doing your homework. You got a gold star today.
Thank you.
So on the issue of campaign promises and keeping their campaign promises, you will remember that Mr. Abe, he made lots of campaign promises. And the only person or the only kind of force that can remind people about that campaign promise is the press. And during the Abe administration, you will recall that more and more he encroached on the press and the press freedom and the selection of the director of NHK and how these stories come out and how you submerge stories that you don't like. So similarly, in this election, and I think just generally speaking, in the context of your question, politicians generally attempt to follow their campaign promises, but there's no obligation to. And I think they can be expedient in moving the process forward and forgetting about their campaign promises. I think that's just a general a general observation. But here in this country, if the press is not vociferous, if the press is not watching and inquisitive and defining all of these issues, the general population is not going to know about it. There's not going to be an outcry, and the prime minister is not going to be pressed to address an issue. The nail that sticks out, if the issue becomes a hot issue, you need to address it. That's where your attention goes. And I think we don't have so much a quote unquote free press in this country. Thank God we've got the weekly publications that come out in the magazine Bunshun and that sort of thing. But we have the same problem in the United States too. I mean, it's probably even more dramatic there. So campaign promises can come and go. But I think for those individuals who are uniquely authentic, and I think Takeichi is authentic, she says what she feels, and I think people like that, and you can tell that this is what she stands for. For maybe Mr. Kishida, it's a little bit squishy, and probably Konotara is a little bit more. He holds in reserve some of his positions, and if you want change, if you want the economy to be addressed, probably now is not the time to say that you're going to fiddle with the money and fiddle with the exchange rates and that sort of thing. Because there will be winners and losers in any kind of dynamic change. But I think if there's going to be dynamic change, it's going to come from Konotaro and not from Kishida and not from Noda, maybe from Takeichi. But it's, it remains to be seen. And also, the thing that we need to watch very closely is who is in the cabinet. So keep your eye on that. We're going to talk about it next week, but we're not going to know precisely who are the cabinet members. We can make some good guesses about it, but who they've selected as cabinet members will indicate what the flow is. So watch that very carefully. I hope that responds somewhat.
Yes, beautifully. And then, okay, before, so can I just ask a very simple question? So BOJ leadership has nothing to do with the election nor politics, correct?
The BOJ, the head of the Bank of Japan, is appointed by the president.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And then, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Yuka.
Office does not expire for another year. It's in 2022 that his term finishes, and he's unlikely to be replaced before that. He's doing pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, and we can proceed now, Frank. Thank you for coming.
Hi, morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Morning, Frank.
Morning, Timothy. Morning, Maya.
Frank, I listened to your room on Thursday. It was really great. Great to get insight from you on Japan Expert Insights on the Thursday morning room.
Thanks very much. And just to repeat what I said then, was on a holiday with such beautiful weather, I was so appreciative of everybody spending the time there. A quick question, Timothy. You said that, and I think everyone would agree, that stability and I suppose what you mean there is longevity in the term of the Prime Minister is good for Japan. In that sense, who of the three candidates do you think would have most long-term support, internal support, to keep them in that position?
Okay, that's a great question, and that question will come up increasingly over the next couple of days. It all depends on how the win is won. So if for example, the LDP selects their president, and we're going through that process right now, how the two losers who will fall out in the by-election, how they are treated after that. Do they get a consolation prize? Is there an effort to consolidate the LDP by, even if you ran and you lost, does that mean you become a black sheep and we don't do anything with you? And if that's the case, so some people are like that. If you ran against me, that's why Mr. Ishiba is so disliked, is because he challenged Mr. Abe. There are other reasons too, but he became a black sheep as a consequence, and nobody wanted to talk to him. He wasn't given any important posts. But if the election of the prime minister is such, the election of the party president is such that he coalesces those. The reason why you're going to fail as prime minister is because you've got enemies within your party. That's the same thing that happens in corporate Japan too. It's not the people, it's not your competition that destroys you. It is the people within your company, that your colleagues, that really eat up all of your energy. They spiritually rob you of your energy. They distract you from what the job is that you should be doing. Same thing happens in politics. So for longevity of the new prime minister, I think there is a desire that that person stays for at least a regular term as LDP president, and therefore hopefully as prime minister. But you could be making some mistakes, and you could be making some enemies. You could be involved in a scandal. Of the four candidates, I don't see any of them that are scandal prone. But even before Mr. Abe became president of the LDP and prime minister, he was seen as a very clean politician. He came from a good stock. He was representing the largest faction. It just, once you get into politics, then your ethics are called into question, and also how you're distributing money, how you're helping your candidate. So it's really hard to say, but I think the desire of the international community and for Japan in general is, let's keep a prime minister for the full term. And if we're going to change horses, let's wait for the end of the term. Let's wait until everybody can at least pronounce their name properly.
Right. Thank you for the answer. Frank, I hope this answers your question.
Yes, thanks very much. It's just that in Japan, pretty more than anyone else, it is that the devil is
in
eternal.
the details. Yep.
Yeah.
And also, Frank, while we're on the topic, the appreciation of Japan internationally as compared to the appreciation of the prime minister internally are two very different areas. I think internationally, Takeichi, who is fluent in Japanese, and Konotaro would score high marks and would do well on the international scene, and would probably spend a lot of time in international relations and geopolitics, particularly Konotaro. But that doesn't, Japan politics is not defined by how the foreigners evaluate Japan. I mean, it's a very small concern.
Right. Yes. But, well, one is sure that as long as, the candidates are, when they are members of LDP, and, obviously they will be perceived as, let's say, as representatives of a, continuation or policy which continues and persists here in Japan. At least if they are not changed every several months, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, having a female prime minister would probably be the most tenuous position, because not only is she female and everybody's evaluating her as the first female prime minister, so they might be a little bit harsh in their evaluation. Not only that, but also on the position she stands for. She is right of center, far right of center, and she's a little bit aggressive with regard to defense and the economy. So she could be blamed for that, and she's just a woman, and we shouldn't have done that in the first place. And my God, how did we select a woman? It could be something like that for cutting a term short. But still, I like the dynamics of having a female prime minister. I just don't think that it's quite her time. The road has not been prepared well enough. But, like Frank said, the devil is in the details. There's a lot of rock and roll to be had before this time next week.
Yes, indeed. And one more thing to the point which Miho made about child abuse and the structures which are not here yet, which haven't been built to actually ensure that their such issues are addressed. There was some news in I think during the past week that basically the ruling party is planning to double the budget for kids here in Japan. And still, of course, it doesn't say much. We don't know what the details will be of that, but hopefully, if there are more voices like Miho's voice, eventually the ruling party and the government will listen to people who have been victims, and who have suffered domestic violence and also child abuse. We don't know. And Timothy, you're also chairman of TEL here, so probably organizations like TEL do have a voice, and their voice can be heard in the future.
Well, even Mr. Suga, he had just 12, 13 months as prime minister. He did achieve a lot, and he established, the Ministry of Caring for, suicide prevention and for a lot of things that Miho described. He also began the discussion about, in fact, the LDP was endorsing that, the Ministry for Taking Care of Children or the Displaced, that sort of thing. It hasn't reached fruition yet, not to the degree that the digital agency did, and not to the degree that the Agency for Caring, that one has been established. There is a minister now. But I think the voices that Miho represents, they need to be heard. And I think depending on what candidate becomes prime minister, we can anticipate some changes there, because a lot of people are saying that. This is actually, September is a suicide prevention month. The largest number of suicides occur in September in this country, and more than 20,000 suicides in this last year. So it is not insignificant what Miho was talking about with children, with elderly care, with stress, with the social services. I'm hopeful that more dramatic change will be made, but a lot of it will depend on who exactly becomes prime minister.
Right. And in this sense of the word, of course, we know that Noda Seiko is probably not going to win, but she looks like a better candidate than Takaichi.
Definitely, sure.
Right. So, Miho, sorry, I saw you were going to say something. Please go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Like in Japan, we only spend money for the child abuse, and 130 times. I don't know how to say that. Put it in English. I'm not good at it in English. 130 times lower than American people spend the money for the child abuse. That's political. ごめんなさい. Sorry, I'm not good at it. Explain that in English. So
no, I completely follow. What you're saying is comparatively.
Did you understand what I said? And,
sure.
And also, like they has a orange ribbon, which is like kind of NPO or some constitution of like supporting child abuse, but like they don't really work, and they only spend money for the like announcement or like a kind of poster pictures and make some photo brochures. And they don't really spend money for the real support for children, and which is really bad. And they had a lot of like saving money in the bank, but they don't really spend for real support.
Yeah, I think Japan is noteworthy in that it has a lot of NPOs. Setting up an NPO is relatively easy, so the numbers are great, but the size of the NPOs are very small, and they don't get any tax breaks. They don't get any support from the government. On the other side, in the United States, there is a feature of having an NPO getting tax deferment, receiving funds from the state. Here, it's a little bit less developed, and I think, just generally speaking, the Japanese are not good at addressing these kinds of issues, and
Yeah.
they just wait until the problem becomes an issue, and then they address it. So it's kind of like after the fact, whereas, you should be developing resources to address the core causes, and the Japanese are not that great at it. They're better at the reactionary phase.
This is not only the individual person, but like there's big influence towards society. And if they don't support this people, this kind of issue, like that gonna be make a lot of troubles in the future. And some child abuse is passed on to the generation to generations, and this is so bad things. Like for
Absolutely.
example, one one guy who sexually abused children may cause 380 people abolish of victimer. One person who abused sexually this guy causes a lot of big influence towards society, which is we really need to take care. Only one person may causes influence to 380 people more than. So we really must put a budget for that, and we really need to increase the knowledge for this kind of issue.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the economics really dictate that we take action. Similarly, with suicide, they say with suicide, for every individual who commits suicide, there are more than 100 people who are traumatically impacted. Traumatically impacted. That means it sticks with them through their life. And what you're saying about any individual who is sexually abused throughout their life, there are more than 300 people who are traumatically impacted by that one thing that happened to them. So just economically speaking, it's better to address that issue, to try and resolve that, rather than to deal with the impact of it. Anyway, Miho, thank you very much for joining and for sharing your insight.
Hello, Tim. Tom here.
Tom is back.
Yes, I'm back. I have this one for you, and/or Amaya. You mentioned the predicament of the so-called junior members of the LDP here. I guess you're referring to the Wakategin, right? So
right, largely Abe.
Are you there?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so the issue of either retaliation or the pressure put on them. Now, I've enjoyed watching these LDP elections from time to time. I guess they usually occur sometime around 1 or 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and you see the front table, and it looks like a plexiglass container, and they have, if I've got it correct, they bring up cards of different colors, and then they tabulate that. It's actually kind of dramatic, but the question I have is this a secret ballot or not a secret ballot? Because, if it is secret, then you could, there would not be the issue of retaliation or nervousness. But your comment seems to lead me to believe there's a way for them to find out. So that's the question.
It's a great question. So on the LDP vote for who is going to become president of the LDP, that's a secret ballot. For the election of prime minister that happens on Monday of next week, that is an open ballot. So everybody can see which chit that you're handing in, what your vote is going to be. With the LDP, the party leaders, the different factional leaders are always going to be saying, hey, Tom, how are you doing? Listen, what do you feel about this? And how are the kids? And I understand your dog died. And listen, Tom, tell me about how you feel. And you're going to have that expression, right, of who you feel. And that is the opportunity for them to convince you how much better it's going to be for this particular faction if you vote a different way. And can I depend on you, Tom? And Tom says, yeah, sure you can. but you don't know. You don't know. So the people that you want to impress with your veracity and your consistency, that you can depend on them, after that conversation, they will go and they'll have a press conference or they'll speak publicly so that the person who, their political faction leader, hears about it secondhand. Yes, he said something very nice. He was more public about his endorsement. That's how they guarantee it. But when the vote is cast, they don't know. And if everybody says, yes, we like her, she's really great, and then she doesn't win, somebody's going to be scratching their heads and saying, no, what in the hell? I thought I had a line on my faction. I thought I had a line on my members. And one of the most destructive things that happening in this election is that the faction leaders have said, you can vote with your heart. I want to vote for this individual, but I'm not requiring you to. This hasn't happened in the past. And so this is a bellwether for how factions are going to be run or managed or kept as a cohesive whole in the future. I think and I predict that the factions are going to be going through a great shakeup within the next couple of months, particularly as the result of the lower house election. So really stay tuned to that, but it's a great question.
Thank you. That was very responsive. And I don't know. That'll be interesting how they would, and how they will fish that in. I mean, like you said, that's the thought is, wow, what happens when they get all of the tatemai? Yeah, sure, I'm with you. And then the numbers don't line up outside of truth serum. There's no, you kind of wonder what's going to happen. So, okay, thank you very much. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you. And Hayato and Aya. So Hayato, I hope you don't mind giving way to the ladies first.
Ladies first.
So yes, Aya.
Thank you. Thank you, Hayato-san. And good morning to Maya and Timothy. Always great to be here. Thank you for having me. Actually, Tom asked the question that I was going to ask. I wanted to ask you about the secret ballot. So I think, Timothy, you well explained, and now I understand how it works. So thank you so much.
Well, the other thing that's kind of important about that question is that you're Japanese, and so you know this a little bit better than a lot of people, but it's very difficult to keep a secret in this culture, in this country.
True.
So there's nefariousness, there's subterfuge, there's betrayal, but in this context, I think it's very difficult to conduct that and get away with it. So I think people are going to be very authentic. They're not going to pull that kind of a trick. There's too much at stake, because not only do we have this vote, but also I'm coming up for election, or most of the people who are voting in the LDP election are going up for an election. And of that group that's going up for election, 46% are in this group that Tom was talking about. 46% are the guys who have only been in the Diet 3 terms. So they're very nervous. They don't want to be considered as a backstabber or a betrayer or a liar. So they're going to be very deft in seeking the guidance of their of who they're aligned to, so that they can depend on that kickback when it comes up for their personal election. So there's a lot of trading going on, as typical in Japanese society and in politics.
Thank you, Timothy. And thank you, Hayato-san.
Thank you, Hayato. Well, let's see what your thoughts are today.
Oh, okay. So just quick update. I keep hearing that this whoever wins is going to be another short term for a couple of reasons, right? This Kobe Taro and Kishida has no power behind, right? And Takaichi is the placement holder until the Abe comes back. So either way, anybody wins. It will be very short term, like a couple months, several months, but for sure less than 1 year. That's what I'm hearing. Another question is, which may be a kind of maybe bigger question now, maybe, is so we try to prioritize this policy based on what's needed for the country, right? And to me, like a number one priority is national security. Otherwise, it's gone, right? And the country will not exist. It will become China in the same day. But like a part of that, as Timothy has mentioned before, that we need a cyber security. Otherwise the whole country will get hijacked right away. Right? Yeah, which as you know, in the United States we have a what's called the cyber, like the force of cyber. What is it called? Yeah, so it's like we have a
Five
Navy,
Eyes.
Army, Air Force, right, Marine, and then cyber. Yeah, so kind of need those kind of things. Otherwise, we will be in trouble and very quickly. Then, but another kind of bothering thing that I'm kind of hearing is Toyota and those Japanese automobile, industry could be gone in the next 2-3 years. Because as like if we keep pushing on this electric vehicle, right? And currently in the United States, Tesla owns 70% or 80% of market share on electric vehicle, right? So that is for Japan, government, predict that they're going to make the Japan the 100% EV by 2030. So that way they go, so it could be like 70% Tesla, and rest of them will be shared by this other car company. So it's a very, very serious problem. So I already know. So considering Japan's automobile industry being the biggest, the industrial sector in Japan, which maybe is about to maybe disappear in the next 2-3 years, that seems to be a serious issue that seems to be considered and prioritized in the policy. I'm done talking. Thank you.
Great insight. And Hayato, thank you very much. Throughout the week, you always contribute and feed me information that you're gathering and press reports, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your participation in this room. The Japanese automobile manufacturing for Japan is the greatest contributor to the amount of investment, in foreign trade. It is the biggest contributor to Japan's position as the third largest economy in the world. And Mr. Toyoda, with the CEO of Toyota Motors, came out just this last week complaining about the increasing disparagement of the gasoline-fired engine and the dichotomy between gasoline-fired and electric vehicle, and everybody wants to go electric vehicle, and Toyota has decided that's not the way. That's not sustainable for us as a company. So there is a huge battle going on, not just with the computer chips and the absorption and need for computer chips, but also the industry overall. And here's the real kicker is that what is the replacement industry for the automobile industry in Japan? Even if it just declines, it's not going to go away overnight. But even if it begins to decline a bit, it's high intensity, high labor input, a lot of electricity involved in the production. With the the growing number of I'm sorry, not the growing number, the declining number of the Japanese population for feeding industry. What is the next economy that's going to be the engine of growth for Japan? There's great search going out for that. And I think the government has identified certain areas as strategic industries that they want to capture. They want to make sure that the Japanese excel at it globally in terms of technology, AI, advanced chips, that sort of thing. But Japan really has to pull the rabbit out of the hat because there are many changes that are going on. And just to address your first question, the election of the LDP president is on Wednesday of this week that we're in right now. If something geopolitically was going to happen, or if there was a financial meltdown, or if, for example, there were missiles that were fired, it could change the dynamic. So the person who is most hawkish could probably generate a lot of appreciation and admiration under that kind of a onslaught, because you'd be on the press, the microphones would be in your mouth, people would be asking you questions, and then there's the vote. So there's still a lot to be determined in these next couple of days. So please, everybody, just stay tuned, and I'm sure our room next week will be full of heat and light.
Yes, thank you, Timothy. Hayato, I hope that this
Oh, thank you.
responds to your comment as well. With this, I think it's time to say goodbye. Wish everybody a great day. And well, once again, thank you everybody for joining us. We're looking forward to having you again next week. So this room is held every Sunday at 8:30 in the morning, Japan time. If you have a bit of time, just join us next time again. In the meantime, you can find the recordings of the previous conversations online. You can follow Timothy Langley and everybody who is in the speaker section or who is in the room, either here on Clubhouse or on LinkedIn, also Facebook or other social media. Please feel free to reach out and let us know if you have any questions, follow-up questions and comments, so that we can also include them in the presentation next time. And well, Timothy, would you like to say a few things, a few words before we close the room?
Thank you very much, Maya. You always run a great room. You do it throughout the week. I'm really honored that you support this room. And I think this is probably our 15th week consecutively running this, Japanese politics one-on-one. And the audience just continues to grow, the sophistication. We got Tom up today. We have, new people coming up on stage each time, and better insight, newer, fresher insight into what's going on. Japanese politics is something that I think everybody needs to keep an eye on. And if you're only doing it once a week, this is the room you should listen in on. So thank you very much. Please tell your friends about it.
This was Japan Expert Insights room on Japanese politics. Thank you for coming and staying with us today. We will be on air next Sunday at 8:30 in the morning, Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and the role of Japan in the Indo-Pacific region. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, you can follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Again, we're looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and enjoy every day as much as possible. See you.